The city doesn't sleep at 4 a.m. It just goes somewhere you can't follow. I worked the overnight shift stocking shelves at a grocery store for 14 months. 2 miles from my apartment, door to door, a route I could have walked blindfolded, past the shuttered pawn shop, left at the corner with the broken traffic light that still blinked amber forever, through the underpass where the acoustics made your own footsteps sound like they were slightly delayed, slightly off, as though something else was matching your cadence a half beat behind. I'd walked it so many times that I'd stopped seeing it. That's the danger of routine. You stop paying attention precisely when you should start. Late October. The fog that night was the kind that doesn't drift. It sits, dense and absolute, swallowing the halos around the streetlights and turning everything beyond 20 feet into gray nothing. I'd gotten off shift at my usual time and stepped out into air that tasted like cold iron. My breath came out in little ghosts. Halfway through my walk, somewhere along the long, empty block between the laundromat and the boarded-up insurance office, I saw the car. It was parked along the curb with the engine running. The headlights were on, throwing 2 pale columns into the fog that just dissolved without hitting anything. No one inside, or at least no one visible. I slowed my pace, studied it for a moment. Cars get left running. Someone runs back inside to grab something they forgot. Someone's warming the engine on a cold night. I cataloged the reasonable explanations and kept walking. I was almost to my street when I heard it again. Not saw, heard. That particular rumble of an idling engine. I recognized it the way you recognize a voice before you turn around. Specific, familiar, in the worst way. I turned, and it was there, 30 feet behind me, rolling slowly with its headlights now off, moving through the fog like something hunting by feel. It stopped the moment I stopped. Complete stillness. I stood in the middle of the empty street and stared at it for what felt like a very long time, my heart doing something ugly against my ribs. And it didn't move. Didn't flick the lights back on. Didn't accelerate. Just sat there, engine muttering, watching me the way only things without faces can watch you. I turned and walked, quickly. Didn't run, I don't know why, some stubborn refusal to confirm that I was afraid. But my feet were moving faster than I wanted to admit. And when I reached my building, I got inside and locked the door and stood in the entryway with my back against the wall, breathing. I went upstairs and looked out my second-floor window. The car was parked directly in front of my building, engine still running, windows dark as ink, tinted so deeply that even under the streetlight, I couldn't see anything beyond the glass. Just the shape of a vehicle and the low, patient sound of its engine, like a thing that had all the time in the world. I watched it for 20 minutes. It didn't move. No one got out. No one got in. Then, with no indication that anything had changed or decided, it pulled away slowly, and the red of its taillights bled into the fog and was gone. I told myself it was nothing. Told myself it, the way you tell yourself a dream, wasn't frightening. Loudly, firmly, right away, before the feeling has time to set. The next night, I left through the back exit, thinking that if I broke the pattern, it would prove the whole thing had been coincidence, would dissolve it into the realm of things that almost happened. I pushed open the rear door of the store and stepped into the back lot. The car was there, idling, headlights off, parked at the far end of the lot, pointed at me. I don't know how long it had been waiting. I don't know how it knew. Those two questions are ones I've never been able to answer. And I've decided that I don't want to. I called a coworker from inside the store and asked her to drive me home. She said yes without asking why. I think my voice told her enough. I never walked home again. Some routes, once spoiled, cannot be reclaimed. There are things that live in the spaces of a house that you don't think about because you have no reason to. The hollow behind the walls, the black crawl space under the floor, the basement you never use. My roommate Dina and I rented the ground floor unit of a duplex on a quiet street. Big trees, old neighborhood, the kind of place that looks peaceful and means it. Mostly. The previous tenants had left behind almost nothing except a door in the utility room. A plain wooden door with a brass knob gone green with age that opened onto a narrow staircase leading down to an unfinished basement the landlord described as empty storage. We had no reason to go down there. We didn't. I should tell you that the door had a particular quality, not the way horror movies do it, not warped or scratched or bearing the marks of something that wanted out. It was ordinary. That was the thing about it. It looked exactly like what it was supposed to be, and it locked from the inside, and we didn't think about it. 4 months in, Dina left for 2 weeks to visit her family. I was alone. The first 3 days I slept fine. Then, on the 4th night, at almost exactly 2 in the morning, I woke up. Not slowly, not mid-dream, awake all at once, sitting up, the room entirely dark and still around me. I lay there for a moment, trying to understand what had pulled me out of sleep, and then I heard it, a sound from below the floor, a slow, dragging quality to it, like something being moved across concrete. I lay perfectly still and listened, and it stopped. Pipes, I thought. The building settling. Old houses make sounds, everyone knows this. I went back to sleep. The next night, same time, same sound. But this version was different enough that I couldn't pretend otherwise. It moved, and then it stopped. And then, after a pause long enough to feel intentional, it moved again. A deliberate rhythm. The rhythm of something being careful. The rhythm of something that was listening just as hard as I was. I got out of bed. The floor was cold under my feet. I walked to the utility room and crossed to the basement door and stood there in the dark for a long moment before pressing my ear against the wood. Silence. Complete and total. The kind that has weight to it. I stood there for a long time. Nothing. I went back to bed and lay awake until gray dawn crept under the curtains. And I told myself that the mind under stress manufactures patterns from noise. And I almost believed it. On the 3rd night, I didn't wait for the sound. I walked to the utility room at midnight and stood in front of the door and looked at it. And I want to be precise about this. The door was closed. I checked the knob. Locked. I went back to bed. I don't know why I checked exactly. Something like the feeling you get when you're certain you've forgotten something, but you can't name what. Morning came. I went to make coffee. I passed the utility room and stopped. The door was open. Not wide, cracked maybe an inch, a thin, vertical dark between the door and the frame. I stood in the hallway and looked at that inch of darkness, and the darkness seemed, in some way I cannot explain rationally, to look back. I closed the door. I pushed one of the heavy boxes we'd been using for storage directly against it, flush with the wood, and went about my day. I told no one. There was no one to tell. The next morning, the box had been moved. Not toppled, not knocked aside, moved deliberately, pushed a foot to the left in a single motion, the kind of displacement that requires intention. The door was open again. Same inch, same dark. I called the landlord that afternoon. He came by that evening, and I watched him take a flashlight down the basement stairs with a body language that suggested he was doing me a favor he didn't think was necessary. He was down there for about 5 minutes. When he came up, he was different. The expression on his face was the specific expression of someone reordering information they thought they already understood. The small ground-level window on the far basement wall had been broken from the outside. Recently, the edges of the glass still sharp, no dust settled. Whatever had broken it hadn't needed to come all the way through, just broken the glass and reached in. The landlord fixed the window. He changed the basement door's lock. He didn't say much else. But he called me 3 days later to ask if everything was fine, and the question had an unusual quality to it. Not casual, not perfunctory. He wanted a real answer, like he had a reason to wonder. I moved out at the end of that month. I told Dina it was about money. She didn't push. Whatever it was reaching for in the dark, I never found out. I didn't want to. The call came at 1:30 a.m. on a Tuesday in February. I was almost asleep when my phone lit up the ceiling. Unknown number. I have a policy about unknown numbers at that hour. I ignore them, let them go to voicemail, deal with it in the morning. But that night I picked up. I don't know what made me. Some instinct I didn't have a name for. The way you sometimes reach for something before you've consciously decided to. Breathing first. Just breathing. Steady, measured. The breathing of someone who has been waiting. Then a man's voice, low and unhurried, said a name. Not my name. A woman's name I didn't recognize. And then he asked, "Are you home?" Not, "Is she home?" Not, "Can I speak to?" He was asking her. He thought I was her. He was asking if she was in her house. Before I could speak, he hung up. I put the phone down and sat in the dark and tried to construct a reasonable explanation. And I managed it. Wrong number, drunk, butt dial, nothing. I went to sleep. I dreamed, and the dream had an unpleasant quality that I couldn't hold on to after waking. Just the residue of it, an emotional stain. 40 minutes later, my phone lit up again. Same number. I let it ring. It rang out, then it rang again immediately, and again, and again. 5 calls in a row, each one beginning the moment the previous one ended, with the mechanical patience of something that was not going to get tired or embarrassed or reconsider. Then it stopped. There were no voicemails, no messages, just the log of 5 calls from a number that, when I looked it up the next morning, came back to nothing. A dead line. A number that, according to every reverse lookup service I tried, did not exist. That afternoon, I got my mail and ran into my neighbor, Mrs. Calloway, in the lobby. I mentioned it the way you mention strange things to people you half know, as an anecdote, slightly self-deprecating. Look at me getting worked up over a wrong number. She went quiet in a way that stopped me mid-sentence. She told me about her sister. 2 months before, her sister, who lives alone in a house in a town about 40 minutes away, had gotten the same calls. Same time of night, same pattern. One call with a man's voice asking if she was home, then a gap, then several calls back to back that she hadn't answered. Her sister had chalked it up to the same wrong number theory, had been slightly unnerved, and then moved on. 4 days later, her sister had gone to close a window in her back bedroom before bed and found it already closed, but unlocked. The latch had been turned. Her sister had a clear memory of locking it because she was the kind of person who checked her windows. She'd always been that kind of person. The window that looks out over the backyard, the one that can't be seen from the street. Nothing happened. No break-in, no further contact. Nothing was missing or disturbed. Just the window, unlatched. Mrs. Calloway told me this without quite looking at me. When she finished, she said quietly, "She thinks someone was checking if she was home before they came." I changed my number that week. It probably did nothing. The number was a tool, not a tether. And if I had learned anything from my neighbor's story, it was that whatever this was, it already knew things about where people were, about who was home, about which windows could be reached. I also started checking my windows before bed, every night, all of them. The latch on each one tested twice. You tell yourself the habits are irrational, but then you do them anyway, every night, because the part of your brain that learned from 2 million years of darkness knows something the reasonable part doesn't want to admit. Sometimes the call is not a wrong number. Sometimes they find the right one. Sleep well.